Hi, my name is Paul Hamilton, and I am a poet. Stars light, so cold. Stars bright, so old. Mothers of us all, aloft, aloof, alive. A short poem there entitled Removed. And the author? Was it a fairly imaginative fifth-form English student, or a retired housewife with a little bit of a lyrical bent? Well, actually, it was a computer. Now, I can just about send an email, and even then I much prefer to take up my quill and parchment and actually compose a missive, forsooth. So you can imagine how intrigued and not a little sceptical I was when I found out about this new battery-brained rival to Ted Hughes. I went to meet systems programmer Simon Tufnell up at York University to investigate. Now, Simon, I am a poet, a human one, last time I looked, and I have to say I'm not sure what to think about the idea of a machine writing poetry.
Well, essentially the same processes as humans are at work.
Are you sure about that?
Oh, yes. For instance, a selection of content depends upon there being an inverse relationship between the perfect semantic structure and well-formed phonic rules.
Right.
So this program supplies 4 variables: a semantic starting point, depth of rhythmic precision, which element should take precedence, and the occurrence ratio at which each element should take precedence.
But you can't surely put onto a computer tape or whatever it is the leap of the soul that occurs in writing poetry, because a computer doesn't have a soul.
Yes, well, I'm guessing if by soul what you really mean is the occasional illogical or surreal aspect that characterises poetry, then this element has that covered. It smudges straight logic because it features an algorithm that optimises word selection by meaning and or sound. How it favours either of those options can be randomised, and then potentially that randomisation can itself be randomised ad infinitum.
Yes, that actually doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever, I'm afraid.
Well, does surrealist poetry make sense?
Well, yes, I see your point, but surrealist poets such as Romanovich, Canterbury or French are humans.
You don't have to be afraid of computers, you know.
No, I'm not afraid of it. I could really easily smash one up, It couldn't get me. Well, I'm not going to, but I know. How about we hear a poem from your fabulous invention there?
Okay. Okay, this one it wrote this morning. It's called Spring. Here we go.
Spring. Buds are peering through the melting snow. Hope above despair. The shells are cracking in pale sun-bathed. Dreams are done. Reality awakes. Arise. It is time to fly.
Okay, now, you're going to think I'm biased, but I don't think that's very good, is it?
But some fairly qualified people do think this poetry is good. Tom Paulin says, quote, it has an eerie humanity, end quote. And no less than Andrew Motion himself said there were several of these poems that, quote, have a very real sense of subtle awareness of the insubstantive experience of existence, end quote.
Well, I don't think this will be the first time the poet laureate and I have disagreed, nor I suspect the last. But that aside, how about one more effort from our little silicon friend over there?
Sure, yeah. You'll be pleased to hear this is a very short one. It's called Software Aware.
Okay, and meanwhile, Simon Tufnell, thank you very much.
I am. I learn. I am. I feel. I am.
Yes, very profound, I'm sure. Incidentally, on the train back home, I wrote this poem. Computer, computer, you know this and that, but do tell me when did you last stroke a cat?
Poet's Tree.
And now this week, Poet's Tree achieved something of a scoop. The controversial American poet Celia Tierny is in London at the moment, adjudicating poetry competitions in Word Up Mother Brown, a festival of poetry by black British women at the University of North Middlesex. She's one of the few poets able to say they've fronted a 1960s psychedelic performance rock band and accepted the poetry chair at an Ivy League university. And much to my surprise, she agreed to drop by for a chat. Of course, I was delighted, but, as you'll hear now, it was never going to be a straightforward interview.
Flying away.
So, Celia.
Hi.
First of all, let me start by saying you've always shied away from talking about your poetry. Why is that?
Because talking about poetry serves no constructive purpose.
Okay, well, true to style, that's a challenging comment there. But why do you think it serves no purpose?
Because poetry occupies a space which cannot be adequately grasped by intellect.
Okay, well, let me take your piece, Quill Pest in Jericho, from your first untitled anthology. I have a copy here, if I may read an extract. Quill Pest in Jericho, crack winds, crack walls, and blow your horn. Curled beard Arabs with serpent shoes, milk saucer skull dish Zionist Jews at war. Quill Pest in Jericho, missile sky fellatio, the Neverland you'll never know.
Please stop.
Okay, right, that was the end of the quote. Then I can see how uncomfortable you are. But surely, I mean, there's plenty to say about this piece.
I would not say anything about it.
Yes, but...
There is no but.
Yeah, but don't you think that... So if
really?
I start... Okay, but wait a minute. If you think that there is no point in talking about poetry, why accept the poetry chair at Yale? Why agree to be interviewed here on Poet's Tree?
In order to spread my message that poetry discussion is meaningless.
It's meaningless. Okay, well, I have to disagree with that.
You have to, certainly, because it then follows that what you do endlessly is meaningless, and I'm sure you'd be loath to confront that possibility.
I don't
My point's made. There's nothing more to say. Thank you.
But I mean,
that's all.
Really?
Yes.
And that told me. Ouch.
Poet's Tree.
Well, this week I went to interview what I consider to be a particularly special guest. His daughter wrote in to tell me that her father is Ernest Jackson. Who, I hear you say? Well, Ernest Jackson was my English teacher at secondary school, and it was he who turned me on at the age of 12 to the delights of poetry. Now, an impressive 91 years of age, I went to have a chat with him in the cosy common room of the Greendale Resting Home in Guildford. Now, Mr. Jackson, I'm sorry, I have to call you Mr. Jackson. Ernest would just seem much too familiar.
I don't mind.
Anyway, Mr. Jackson, I can honestly say, if it hadn't been for you, I would not have started writing poetry.
Oh, good.
Yes, and do you know what it was that inspired me?
No.
It was your passion.
Oh.
Yes, I remember sometimes you'd get completely carried away. Quite often you'd climb up onto the tables and regale us with Tennyson and Keats and Blake.
I couldn't do that now. Not with my back. I'm a bit doddery now.
I don't know.
I'd probably fall off. You might have to call
Would you say that passion was the basis of good poetry?
Yes.
And of course, you wrote poetry yourself, didn't you, Mr. Jackson?
Oh, yeah, poetry, yes, I still do, yes.
Could we hear some, perhaps?
Yes, I have one here that I wrote a few months ago. It's about my wife, Marjorie, who died last year.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So, what is the poem called?
Memories of Love.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet as nectar, sharp as a blade, I remember her. Light as the summer morn, dark as war, I remember her. Courageous as a lion, fearful like a child, I remember her. Past to present, present to past, I remember her. And into these memories soon I shall merge with her, together at last in the memory of eternity.
Well, that is very beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, Mr. Jackson, I've written a poem in honour of you.
Oh.
Yeah. Would you like to hear it?
Yes, please.
I'll read it to you. It's called Thank You, Mr. Jackson. Thank you, Mr. Jackson, for the fury and the passion, for the utter dedication to the power of the word. Thank you, Mr. Jackson, for causing a reaction in the verse-adoring faction and the power that you stirred. Thank you, Mr. Jackson, for giving me permission to use imagination in the bearing of my soul. Thank you, Mr. Jackson, for making me take action to make my destination the poetry goal. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Thank you, Mr. Jackson.
You're welcome.
Yes, I wrote that yesterday, actually, when I found out we were coming to interview you.
It's very good.
Do you think so? But how would you mark that?
Yeah, how would I...
How would you mark that? What grade would you give that?
I haven't marked anything for 25 years.
Yeah, but still, how... Oh, please, sir, how did I do, sir? Okay, you taught English and poetry for 45 years. What's your proudest achievement, would you say?
Oh, without a doubt, young Robin Knight.
Ah, right. He's another ex-pupil of yours, isn't he? As well as me. A name probably familiar to some of our listeners. 3 published anthologies of poetry, all bestsellers in the poetry publication listings, and not yet 40.
Yes. I'm proud to have had him as a pupil.
It's good. Any other highlights in your career?
I'm afraid my memory is not what it used to be.
No. Right, well, thank you for speaking to us, Mr. Jackson, and it's been an absolute privilege to meet up with you again.
Yes.
Mr. Jackson, poetry salutes you. And before I go, there's just one final tidbit. Listener Alice Redwing of Lewes has written to me enclosing a rather nice picture of herself getting a great big pie of some sort out of an oven. And she writes, being an early-to-bed type, I always download Poet's Tree from the BBC's Listen Again service and have it on at a more sociable hour while I'm cooking. Here's a photo of one of my creations that you helped to inspire. Have you ever written any poems about food? This is called Sea Crime. Ocean, great ocean, briny madam, mother of the fish, hear my confession. Tonight I cooked and ate one of your scaly sons or daughters. Oh, that you could understand and forgive. Seduction by almond and tarragon sauce. Until next time, bon appetit.
Poet's Tree was written by Kevin Eldon and Stewart Lee. It was produced by Ed Morrish.